All right, buddy. All right, buddy. I was just thinking, like, how long have we known each other?
Well, I mean, I've been in Vancouver 15 years, and I think that basically I was not really in the business for the first year and a half. I was out of it completely. And then I started getting back into the business around late '06, early '07. So that's when I started working a little bit of shows as a runner and doing some of these things in Vancouver. And then I knew Doug Fury already. So we started doing some stuff with the Almighty Truth, which was him and Scotty and those guys. And then when you guys were running the CFOX bands thing, like the Band Wars, whatever that was called, remember that was called?
The Seeds, CFOX.
Yeah, the Seeds,
Yeah.
the Almighty Truth. I was with Doug on that, just saying, hey, if you need some help. And I kind of was dipping my heels in management. And I think that's really when we started connecting, because
Right.
I was in the studio a lot, coming to see you with Doug, and Doug was coming in, and I was part of the Seeds thing a little bit. And also I had started with Live Nation locally at the time, and you and Danger and Neil were all doing intros at the shows at the Commodore and Richards and some of these places that I was doing. So I would say it was probably late '06, early '07.
So yeah, around there. We're coming up on 15. Anyway,
yeah, buddy.
Probably next year. Yeah. Mentioning you worked with Live Nation, we're going to of course get into a lot of that, because I'm sure that you have some thoughts on how everything's going to be progressing over the next year and a half, 2 years kind of thing.
Certainly interesting.
Before we get to that though, I want to go back to the beginning. I want to go back to the Donnelly house. What's the music in your house as a kid growing up?
It was a mixture of things, because my dad actually played in bands his whole life. So for my dad, he opened up for the Dave Clark Five, you know what I mean, and back in the day. And so there was a lot of, my dad was always part of like the epitome of like 50s, 60s, stuff. He was always in those kind of bands. He had a country cover band doing like Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, like all the the outlaw stuff. Yeah. And then he had like a 50s band called Pink Cadillac that did all this stuff. So I had all this kind of hybrid of that. My mom's side, my grandfather had a radio show.
Oh, really?
So there was always a studio, and I think this is what got it going. There was always a studio down in the basement with these old mics and all this cool shit. And so I always had a bit of that. We always had like Eagles and, so
right.
Anything with like 4-part harmonies was around in my house prominently. My parents had split, so I had like my mom's side, which was super musical, always somebody with a guitar doing something. And my dad's side, every weekend he was playing a gig. We'd go and check out the rehearsal. So there was that kind of like influx, and you're like 6, 7 years old and you see a set of drums, and then you're like, I want to play them. And then you're like, what am I going to play first? And then it's like, I think it's like I Love It Loud by Kiss, right, or whatever. Like that was a funny thing. Or there would have been like, something AC/DC probably back then. But my first drums were on like milk cartons and things like that. And I'd play along to my dad's band practices, and they were doing like all that kind of stuff, so yeah, that's kind of where it went. And then I got introduced to metal through my cousin, who had all the Iron Maiden records and Ozzy and stuff. And then that parlayed into a good friend of mine, Jason, that we used to walk around with a ghetto blaster and blast Ozzy Osbourne. And then it just kind of took off from there. And my cousin Daryl actually was working for CFNY in Toronto, and would always get me access to really great music. So he had like he was Billy Idol, and then eventually he was into a little bit more new wave, but he also ended up going down the rock world with the hip and some other things. So it just kind of came out of, there was music from all angles,
Right. So it's not a stretch that you ended up working, touring with Live Nation, the biggest promoting.
I always wanted to be a musician and making it as a band, but there's only a handful of those slots available now, isn't there?
Right. And what was your first concert that you went to?
The first ever concert I ever went to was the Monsters of Rock.
Wow.
With Metallica, Aerosmith, BlackCrowes, and Warrant. So I was at that point like a hair metal guy.
Yeah.
So I was there. I was kind of, well, I mean, the thing was with Metallica, it was on the Justice tour. So I didn't have anybody introduce me to Metallica. So I went there going, oh, this is, they're too heavy, or it's going to be too heavy for me. Cause that was sort of like, if it wasn't on Q107, it was too heavy.
Right.
Right. So it was like, I was going to see Aerosmith and Warrant.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like watching 50,000 people go, chant die. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Right. This is after Warrant had got booed off the stage, but it was the BlackCrowes' first show in Toronto. So that was really cool.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is if you read Sebastian Bach's book,
but I've heard his
autobiography, he talks about that show because Skid Row is just breaking. And they had got invited there. There was a whole bunch, I think some Guns guys were there. It was like what was going on backstage at that show that was my first concert is in itself its own story.
Right.
So that was the first big show that I went to. And I'd gone to a handful of like little tiny things, but that was the big concert.
Yeah. And why not?
The first time I smelt weed, the first time I, like what's going on and, Otto's jacket, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Why does he smell like daddy, Mom?
Yeah.
What's your favorite rock read? We're mentioning.
Well, I'm an autobiography guy, so I'm kind of all over the place. I really like Sebastian's book because I just feel like he has this interesting story to tell. You hear enough on the Skid Row side about the problems they had with him. You hear about him on his side, about him trying to reconcile it and get it back together. And then you kind of go, well, which side do I want to believe? And you kind of believe both sides. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic to it. I really dug where he got into because I grew up, I was born where he was kind of born. So he's Peterborough guy. I'm like Port Perry, like about 25, 30 minutes from there. And a lot of the things he talks about in that book, I saw. And Steven Tyler's book is great. I love Duff's book. Slash's book was really cool. Motley Crue, The Dirt, all that kind of stuff is cool. I haven't gotten into I haven't gotten into, or haven't just had a chance to read a lot of the maybe 70s artists yet, but eventually,
Did you mention Hagar in that?
No, but I have to read it. I toured actually this summer with a good friend of his, actually. And he was the production manager, a guy named Paul Binder, who is production manager for Alice in Chains, and ended up being production on the whole Alice in Chains Korn tour that I did. And him and Sammy are really, really close. So we do a lot of chats from, at the time, and he was telling some great Sammy stories, and I really have to read his book because I got a newfound respect for Sam. A lot of people want to keep it Dave, and I get it. But I really, after kind of spending some time with Paul, understanding like that, it's a thing. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Sammy Hagar for me would probably be top 10 for sure of people that I'd want to interview.
Oh, I bet you it would be great. And the funny thing is I have a funny story about him in just a quick one. Cause I was in Vegas a couple of years ago with Brent Fitz and Todd from Slash's band, and we all went to Sammy's Cabo Wabo bar in Vegas, and we walked in, and they were playing dance music, and Eddie Trunk was with us. So Eddie called him on the phone and was like, "They're playing dance music at your club," and within minutes it had switched to like Whitesnake or something.
Right, as it should be. All of a sudden, in the still of the night.
Totally.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. Yeah. So let's get into what you do with Live Nation and kind of how you got there, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would love to be in your shoes, or at least be in your shoes a year or 2 years ago.
Well, the gig itself is interesting. The gig itself is interesting. I started in a band, obviously, like we all do, with grand plans to make it, and then it kind of went to a point where I had run my course as a drummer, and it just wasn't going to work. We were touring with Sum 41 and all these cool bands at the time, and I'm like, these guys are just killing. Like, these drummers were just like you know,
Vicious.
killing me. And they were deadly. And it was great. And we had our own thing there. They had their own thing. But I was like, you know, I think I'm done playing in a band. And so I played in a band with Chris Machete, who's on the Dean Blundell Network. And we had a lot of fun with it. And I thought I want to switch and maybe become a manager, because what was happening was I was also putting on concerts at the time and meeting tour managers, and they kept asking me to tour with their bands. Like, hey, do you want to go on tour? Or the management company wants you to go on tour. I started doing I Mother Earth shows and Our Lady Peace and Tea Party, and all those people are all connected. And I just had opportunity after opportunity to become a tour manager. So I jumped out, tour managed, and which was basically managing the band's day-to-days on tour. And
Like
meeting,
making sure they get to sound check and don't
all of it,
screw up,
schedule, accounting, you name it, paying them per diems, making sure you don't lose the guitar player, you know, just
yeah, make sure they all make it to the airport. Yeah,
you're on call all the time. So I did that, but I'd met guys like me across the way. And so I like guys like that you might know, like Pete Clyde or Dave Fortune, that were out here.
Yep.
I had met them, John Donnelly, who's in, you know, I'd met them on my first tours back in like 99 as a tour manager. And so when I moved out to Vancouver, Live Nation and House of Blues concerts had just merged and had gone from 200 shows a year to like 1,000 shows a year in Western Canada. And they needed guys that could go and run the concerts on behalf of the promoter. The old way was like, you bought the show, you went, you ran the show, you paid the bands. It was like you had this relationship with the band where they knew you personally and all the rest of it. But as things get busy, you just can't be everywhere all at once. So you hire guys like me to go on your behalf and run the show and maintain that relationship on behalf of the company, myself, the promoter, everyone, to kind of move it forward and progress with the band. So that's what had happened by you know, when I moved here in 05, I wasn't really into it. I kind of taken a break. But by the end of 06, 07, beginning of 07, I was asked to come in and see if it was something I'd be interested in doing. And so then I jumped right into it, because tour managers generally make the best promoter reps, as we're called, because we've done the tour managing, we've done the accounting, we know deals, we know management, we know all that stuff. So that's what you kind of, your learning curve's a little bit easier when you come in as a tour manager. So I started doing that. Commodore, Richards, you know, all the club shows, Media Club, and then graduating to touring across Western Canada, doing same size of shows, but like taking like Theory of a Dead Man and all these kind of like your buddy Dave, shows after shows, Jimmy Eat World, just taking him across Western Canada and running it on behalf of the promoter. And then it just gradually, you build, you go from clubs, you go to theaters, and then you go to smaller arenas, and then you go to full arenas, and then it's stadiums. So it just has this gradual build as you go. And all the stuff that you learn on club level and theater level, you need in order to run an arena show. So
it all applies, right? I mean, the foundation is there, whether it's the Media Club or you know, GM Play, Rogers Arena. You
still got to park a vehicle. You still got to get people in. You still got to do the accounting. You got to feed them. You got to pay them. And it's just so it just depends on what size of scale that is that you're doing it on. So.
Right. And you're just mentioning the Alice in Chains Corn tour.
Yeah.
I don't know how deep you're allowed to get into the behind the scenes stuff, but what's some of the have you ever like had crazy moments on tour where you're like, maybe the guitarist isn't there, they didn't show up, or
that's a weird one, you know,
or like, you know what I mean?
I honestly have to tell you, Todd, I've had a run of like pretty decent. I've had acts not go on for like 45 minutes. I've had, you know, I toured with Lauryn Hill all over Australia and Europe last year. Yeah. And well, that's its own thing. She's her own thing. So there is a bit of like status stuff, you know, that people that you kind of have to deal with. You know, I've done a lot of hip hop and a lot of diva tours, and they're just, it's its own thing. You know, the music, the music is kind of second to what the bigger thing is, right? So there's that one on a rock tour or a country tour. It's always just like, you know, go for it. The crazy days of trashing hotels and stuff. I wish I had stories for you about that.
No.
I'm sure something will come to me down the road, but I've been kind of lucky, really.
Yeah,
you know?
missed it by 50 years. Imagine the guys that were tour managing Led Zeppelin and the Who, and like in the 70s, the early 70s, it had just been fucking chaos.
Yeah. Yes, and I had the pleasure of touring with Marty home with Shakira. Marty's like one of the top tour managers in the world. Rolling Stone just did a big article on him. He's actually, I think, going to come on my podcast pretty soon. But he's Fleetwood Mac. He was just about to head out with the Stones. I mean, the guy has got oodles and oodles and days of stories. So that that's pretty. That was a learning. You never stop learning. So
right. And being such an integral part of the machinery of such a big company like Live Nation, you're certainly one of the main cogs when they're getting bands like, didn't you do something with, was it Halsey?
Yeah, I just was out with Halsey. Actually, we did basically like the last tour in the world.
Oh, is that right?
So,
okay.
I think the Stereophonics were out, and Elvis Costello and us. I think we were the last ones. We were in Manchester for the last show, and then literally the world shut down the next day.
Right. So
a good friend of mine from Vancouver, Bob Chemis, was out with Elvis Costello, and he had a show the same night as us. I think they'd finished a little bit early. I think the Stereophonics went on a little bit later, so they might have actually had the final actual downbeat in the world. We were close. We were at 11 p.m. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And how optimistic are you about getting things back to normal? I guess.
I wish I could read people's minds as far as what the general public thinks, because it's really going to come down to them and whether they feel comfortable in going to group settings and going to shows again. Like, like our business is they call it recession proof, but it's proving very quickly that it's certainly not a priority. Now people want to spend money on entertainment when something bad happens, and I get it, but still with this kind of thing, it's such a global pandemic thing that everyone's in fear and no one has any answers. And I don't know if we're going to get those answers until we get a vaccine. Things are starting to, and I'm not even going to get political about it, but things are starting to open up. Concerts, I still don't think are going to. I think everything is being pushed to 21 as it looks right now. I can just tell you that I don't plan on actually doing a show until like 1 year from now.
Right. Wow.
If I get a call before then, I'll be surprised. And I know there's a shit ton of people working very hard to make this happen, but no one's going to do it at the expense of their tour, their personnel, the fan safety, anyone's safety. So until we start getting some answers about a few things, I'm kind of, going to be probably driving for Uber. I don't know. Who knows what's going on?
Right. What a crazy time, because it's it's one thing to go see maybe a 20-person show or something at a pub or whatever, you know what I mean, but it's another to go to 15,000 people at an arena.
Totally.
So yeah, it's going to be dependent on that, which is odd. And you're mentioning, people going back now, everything's kind of somewhat going back to, you can, gather, and have different people into your bubble and everything else.
Yeah.
But let's see how that goes in 2 or 3 weeks from right now.
I don't know, man. I don't know what to say. I've had a lot of people call me about it, and I have no answers because I'm standing by myself. I just know there's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of people out of work because of it.
Yep.
And we just have to kind of be patient and sort of see where it's going to go. I'm the same way about sports. Like, I love hockey and I miss the Stanley Cup and I miss all this stuff, but I don't miss it enough to have it just be half-assed. I don't miss it enough to be like, well, you kind of like, we're only letting 4,000 people into the game. It's going to be worse than trying to get into 17,000. So like, it's like, go the whole way.
Yeah.
Or let's just wait until we can go the whole way.
Did you like the idea of the early playoffs and the 24 teams?
I was on with Dean Blundell and Mancuso a couple months ago, but whatever, when I was stuck in my room sick.
Right.
And I had said, why not run right into the season? So let's just start, if they have the option, let's take a break, run the Stanley Cup playoffs in September, crown a champion, take 2 weeks off, and then start the season. And I'm like, it's not like it's too different now. Like they're proposing stuff, and then it's going to maybe be like a mid-October, November. I'm like, just have the have the training happen, have the playoffs happen, crown a champion, and then you're defending it within 2 weeks. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. Screw this 4 months off. It's like, no, man, you were the champion 2 weeks ago, and now we're fucking coming for you.
Right.
And we just missed you by 1 game, and we're going to get you in April. And I just think that would be really cool.
Yeah, it would be a pretty good idea.
Do we like this effect behind me now that I'm a silhouette in a tree, or shall I move for you?
You're just starting to become one with the tree here. Yeah.
For our listeners that are not watching, Todd and I are zooming with an ominous looking tree behind me now. Because
I'm going to hopefully be able to do more zooms and capture some of these guests that I have rolling through. Like I just had Grant Fuhr as a guest.
You lucky bastard. I've been trying to get Fuhr for forever. So we'll talk about that. I'm just a huge fan. I've been a massive fan of Grant for my whole, forever. So yeah, awesome. Good for you, man. I can't wait to hear that interview. I don't even want to ask you about it because I just can't wait to listen to it. So
yeah.
It's amazing.
It was okay. It wasn't certainly for me. It wasn't as good as what I was hoping it was going to be.
He wasn't giving you something, or you just weren't in it?
I think that it was just more that he
mailing it in, maybe
it's a little bit of both, maybe it was that I was hoping that he would just, with open-ended questions, he'd just let rip and tell stories. But and I also knew that I only had 10 to 15 minutes with him, right? So
that's all you had.
Yeah, as the clock is ticking down, when you have those kind of time parameters, it's not like you can just fuck the dog and go off like we will tonight. You know what I mean? Like it's
sure.
And it's also freaking Grant Fuhr, man.
Yeah.
That looks way better, by the way. Whatever you've done there, your lighting.
Well, we've added a little bit of lights. I'm just gonna. Yeah, we've added a little bit.
Person needs a raise.
The lighting person is the LG V30 phone.
Yes.
So that's what's going on. I'm gonna try one more position here, and see if this works.
It was okay. But yeah, I guess the gist of this is we're gonna hopefully record a lot more with the upcoming guests that we've got, and I've got some big ones, man. Tyson Fury, dude,
you got Tyson Fury? Amazing.
Is supposed to be coming on. So that's one of those, like, I've been pushed back. Like I think I've been, I want to say close to 3 years trying to get him on.
Is that frustrating to get pushed back? Because I've been like redeployed a handful of times, and I'm like, I had it in my head how I wanted the interview to go and all the rest of it.
Right. Yeah, that's just the way it is, though. That's just the game, right?
Sure.
That was the same in radio. It wasn't as bad in radio because generally it was like, if it was radio, it was pushing their new album, or it was pushing the show that they're playing in Vancouver, so they wanted to get on.
Yeah.
Tyson Fury is like, Todd who?
Right. That's got to be tough, man. I'm still trying to book guests, and I'm doing my thing. I'm not doing anything this week, and I'm about to launch. Mercedes, our friend Mercedes, just launched her podcast, so giving her some room to do that. She's my co-host on the Travelcast, and then also just trying to.
What's her podcast again? It was
it's called Dropping In.
Dropping In.
Yeah. So she's doing really well with that. And so I've taken a break from that. The Travelcast, I got a couple episodes left, and then I'm moving on to Life, and that's going to be a big one for me. So I'm kind of gearing up for that. So
yeah. So how did you come up with those ideas to bounce around like that? Because initially it was the Brenton On Tour podcast, and then it was the quarantine podcast.
Well, it's kind of what happened was I felt like I couldn't fill 100 episodes of coffee because it kind of started with coffee. Me traveling around the world, trying to find the best coffee in the world, and I was putting great coffee people on, and people be like, great coffee people, what? But I'm like, but I had like the best roaster in the world. I had, you know, Ray from Korn and Brent from Slash's band talking about the Korn's coffee brand and some of the best gear in the world and where they've been. So we just had these unique coffee conversations. And I'm like, I just can't fill 100 episodes of this. And it turned into me kind of feeling like, but what else can I talk about? I was like, well, I can talk about music. I can talk about travel, and I can talk a little bit about life because I'm surrounded with all these great people. So why don't I break it up into 4 modules? So that was the plan. And then the world crumbled. And so now I'm not on tour. So now I've like, well, now it's going to be the Brenton Not On Tour quarantine cast. So I've kind of got I've got the Brenton travel cast going, but I've got the Not On Tour quarantine cast, which is just kind of random conversations with people that kind of jump into the mix. And then we'll move on to life, and life is going to be an important one for me. So that's a good one.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing that. Have you got anybody lined up for those, or?
Yeah, so I've got a girl named Claire Poulion who is a best-selling author for. She wrote the book called The Sober Diaries, which was her journey from being a mom that was a little probably too much into the drinking and all the rest of it, and was stuck and couldn't get out of it, and wrote a blog, I believe called The Sober Mummy, and got 1 million followers or something. It turned it into a best-selling book. I found it like a year and a half ago because I'd stopped drinking. I was like, I'm gonna try to tour by not drinking. I'm gonna try to tour for the first time in my life without a drink of alcohol, and because I was getting really busy with what I was doing, plus just responsibility, plus days off can be a bitch. So I was like trying to kind of clean it up a bit and be like, whatever. And I'd found her book and really loved it. And then I actually messaged her while I was going through this journey, which was, a bit of a struggle. And she got back to me. She just was kind of supportive the whole time. And I asked her if she'd ever wanted to come on and talk about the podcast. She hadn't done any podcasts at that point. And she sold like 1 million books. So I was like, okay, why don't you come on? So she came to see me in December at the O2 in London, and we had a really good talk, and it coincided with the brand new book she just released about 2 weeks ago. So she's going to be my first guest. And then from there, I got some actors, I got a few things. So it's going to be cool. Yeah, it's going to be cool. It's going to be a bit of a different, not necessarily pop culturally, but it's going to be a little bit more
like
lifestyle stuff. Yeah.
I try to get a little bit of lifestyle in with everything that I do with this podcast too, right? Obviously, it leans rock and kind of entertainment based, I guess, but I do like to find out, like what are you binge watching right now? What are the shows that
I'm watching YouTube videos on how to break a podcast. No, we just finished up the Ozark, so that was great. I love it. Love it.
Bateman is like one of the best, man.
Speaking of YouTube though, there's a really killer video about why he's so perfectly cast for this show. And a lot of people are like, they have a hard time with Bateman because they don't understand why, he's just so chilled. And if you really dive into what's going on with the Ozark, he co-wrote most of it. He's producing it. He's directing a handful of episodes. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I like playing the normal guy surrounded by anarchy. And if you watch everything that he's done in the last 15 years, he's pretty much the normal guy surrounded by anarchy.
Right.
And then when you watch Ozark, you're like, this guy is perfect for this.
Yeah. So good. Like the Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh yeah. I finished Curb Your Enthusiasm. I finished Ozark. What else?
No, that's not the Curb. That's not the Bateman.
Arrested Development.
Arrested Development.
Yeah. So that was great. I mean,
Curb Your Enthusiasm is a great show too, but no,
that brought him back into it. But I'm not really getting a lot of time to watch. I know this sounds weird, but I'm homeschooling the kids, and then my afternoons are like building this thing out, trying to be, present at the house and making sure things are doing well there, trying to brand out the podcast, trying to find work. So I find I don't really get a chance to sit down and do a TV thing until later on, like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And that by that time, it's like, well, I got about one episode in me or two episodes, and then I'm, back up. So
no, I'm the exact same way. Yeah.
But I'm trying to add more of it. I talked to Chris Machete a little bit, and we're working towards like a bit of a pop culture kind of broadcast that we're going to kind of touch on some stuff, comics and a few things. So I'll get a little bit more into it.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, it's been interesting.
So would you consider putting your kids back in school, like they're saying, in June 1st or whatever? It's up to whether or not.
I want to leave it to them. I want to leave it to them. Well, my kids are, they're 11 and 9, and Alex is very close to being 10. So there's a couple things. They're getting a lot of work at home. So my little guy's getting loaded up with a grade 4 work. He's got like 11 projects a week, so he's pretty jammed.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be a social experiment from the standpoint of just go back and play with your friends. If it's one of those things where, hey, we need him here for the last month to really just make sure he's prepped for grade 5 on a couple of things. Same with my daughter who's in French immersion. Hey, we really need her here for this last month because we really need to touch on some of these things that she's going to need for grade 7. So that's kind of like where I'm at right now. And I've got teacher friends that are like, I hate this. And I've got other teachers that are like, we need it. I'm just for like, what's the best thing for the kids, for the teachers, for the school system? Because to me, there isn't much of a difference between putting them back in June 1st and putting them back in September the 8th. It's only 2 months. So are we going to be that much better come September, or can we just forego the June thing and just start it in September? And I don't know. So I'm kind of leaving it to them. I'm leaning towards sending them just to kind of see how that's going to go. But I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know. I'm not one of those guys that like, yeah, I've been through it. So if it's been through the house with me, then they've all gotten it and recovered. I don't know. I recovered and there was no signs from them. Obviously it's other people's kids you got to be worried about sometimes, or other parents that aren't being responsible and sending their kids sick. I can just say that I'm happy to wait till September, but if they really, really are pushing to go,
yeah,
perhaps we'll look at it. So.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. We're not giving them the option here. We're just like, no, it's not happening.
Okay.
My kids are 7, 9,
Sure.
I honestly feel like we're probably teaching them better than what they're being taught in school.
Yeah. I'm certainly learning a lot.
Yeah. Right.
I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. We're all waiting for the world to get back to normal. I just don't know what that's going to look like. Obviously, it's not going to be normal for a little while. Normal for me is let's start with what school looks like so we can get them back to some kind of normalness, and then we'll work around it. Right.
Right. Yeah, man. It's all about the kids, right? And then work around their little worlds.
Because everyone will just bitch and complain about the stores and about the Gap not being open or whatever the hell. That's fine. But when it comes to education, how much leeway do we have before we can hold them back? And then all of a sudden, my daughter's like 14 and she's missing a grade and a half. It's like,
yeah.
So let's get that back to normal and figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah. And we're kind of just wondering what we're going to be doing with our summer plans. We had plans to go to Tofino for a couple of weeks. We had plans to go up to the Okanagan and Penticton for a couple of weeks. Those are probably scrapped. It's probably going to be a long, quiet Vancouver summer.
Are you talking camping, or are you talking just like hotels or Airbnbs?
Yeah, Airbnb in the Okanagan and those little A-frames on Mackenzie Beach.
Yeah.
Listen,
I feel like once they open up camping, you pretty much should be good to go. Like, I mean, and they're talking mid-June for that. As long as I think you're doing your part, Todd.
Yeah.
Till like I don't know if your kids have been playing with any kids or what's been going on, or if they've been in the neighborhood, in the park, or doing whatever.
Not
But
really. Not
but
kids. I mean, we've been in the parks and stuff, but we're
yeah,
definitely keeping distance, right? Even still, where they're like, "Yep, it's fine." The only people that have been in my house is my sister-in-law
yeah.
and her husband, right? Like,
So I think that once the camping restrictions are lifted a bit, and maybe it's every other campsite. I know that they're going to close the bathrooms and things like that. So you just got to decide whether you want to do that.
actually camp.
Or if you're just going to go hit the beach and hit a hotel and rely on the hotel staff to do their thing. I don't know. I think there has to be a point there where we do your part, you do everything you can within your part, but then you have to kind of start living a bit and just kind of getting back into it. And as I told Dean Blundell before, I'm like, let's just accept the fact that everyone's going to get it. So let's just find out when. Like, everyone's going to get it and get through it, or not. I don't know. Let's just move on. So it's like, I don't know what the plan is, but I think if our Bonnie, who our health person, says, okay, let's see what you got, people, then let's do our part, but let's start living. Let's
Yeah.
start trying to live a little bit,
Boy, she won over everybody's hearts, hey? She's done a great job.
She should be prime minister.
Yeah, she's.
You can't get mad at her.
No.
Even she's like your nice aunt that gets pissed off. If she gets pissed off, everyone's listening. Like, if she looks at the camera, is like, you fuckers, I told you to stay the fuck off the beach and you didn't, you little shits. Fuck you. Everyone back in the house. Everyone's gonna go, holy shit, Bonnie's mad at us.
Yeah, totally. Oh, nice.
Aunt Bonnie's mad at us. We're screwed.
What's your plan for the rest of the night?
Man, well, it's the last day of the long weekend, obviously, so gonna get the kiddos down. And try to relax and enjoy a flick, or just kind of just chill. It's an early day tomorrow. I'm up with them, and I try to keep them on a bit of a regime a bit. We get rolling regular school time for them, so I try to keep that weekend, that Sunday or that Monday, okay, out you go to bed. So I'll chill out a bit, and kind of prep for the week, which is now short, but I actually have a busier week ahead of me now of some stuff. So yeah, man, just prepping.
Yeah, same. My week's getting a little bit busy, filling up, trying to get a couple more sponsors on. I got a couple sponsor meetings. I got a couple interviews and stuff. But more than anything, like you, man, I'm just trying to, get by and live like as normal as you possibly can, and suddenly be a grade 2 teacher and a grade 4 teacher, and etc.
It's something, man. It's something, and it's I mean, every generation goes through something. So here we are. But keep making content and banging it out and having some fun, and that's all we can really do, right?
Yes, indeed. Where is the best place for people to stalk you socially online?
Well, me and my 450 Twitter followers that never seems to grow, even after 10,000 people view something. Anyways, someone walked me through that. Anyways, you can find me at Brenton On Tour on Twitter. You can find me Brenton On Tour podcast on the Instagram. Brenton On Tour on Facebook, BrentonOnTour.com. And that's pretty much where I am, man.